They've got very little left. They've got some missiles. They've got some drones. They've got some manufacturing ability, not much. We control the Strait. They don't control anything.
No one wants to see this regime get a nuclear weapon. But the fact is, this war has not advanced that objective.
They violated the deal with their president's signature on it by disrupting the Straits of Hormuz. And obviously, we have been retaliating against that violation of that deal ever since.
New strikes tonight inside Iran. The question is, will it expand even more to full-scale operations once again? Central Command putting out a statement late this afternoon saying today at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S. forces began a new round of strikes against Iran at the Commander-in-Chief's direction. The strikes are designed to further degrade Iranian military capabilities used to attack commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. The Secretary of State asked whether the Memorandum of Understanding with Iran is officially dead.
They're not complying with it. I mean, the straits are supposed to be open, free of tolls, free of attack, free of all the things they're doing against these ships. So you can't have an MOU that's alive if they're violating the terms of it. And they continue to send signals that they want to talk, that they want to negotiate. But their behavior is what we're responding to. And their behavior is they're launching missiles and drones against ships.
So let's start there with our panel. Roger Zakheim, Washington Director of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. John McCarthy, former Senior Advisor for Political Engagement for President Joe Biden. And Politico Playbook co-author Dasha Burns. All right, Dasha, obviously the president has signaled this, that he's going to retaliate every time Iran turns its back on what they're negotiating. And now 2 other U.S. military deaths, which really changed the dynamic.
Yeah, look, Brett, I am not surprised that this is escalating. I was at NATO when President Trump basically tore up the MOU, called the Iranians scum. And from then on, it has gotten more and more heated. And of course, now that you have these 2 deaths, there is very little optionality for this administration at this point now that the MOU is, as Marco Rubio said, not alive anymore or dead. There is only the option of escalating. The question is, how far is that going to go? There is the Israeli counterpart there that does want to see Iran fully demolished, right? And so you have an ally pressing the president to go further, and you have an Iranian regime that, even if they were to be able to get back to the negotiating table, I think it's become very clear that the powers that are coming to the table are not necessarily the ones that control the guns. Yeah. Meantime, obviously, Roger, the national average of gas prices goes up, and the new chart is $4 per gallon. A week ago, $3.87. The White House Assistant Press Secretary is saying as the U.S. military degrades terrorist Iranian regime's ability to attack commercial vessels, disrupt the free flow of energy through the Strait of Hormuz, oil and gas prices will plummet back to pre-conflict levels. But, you know, live crude prices, if you look at them right now, you know, it's 83 something, 83.14. But you get a full-scale deal and you're back up to 105. Yeah, I think there is optionality for the president. It's a question of how much does he want to escalate, and that really matters a lot here. What the Iranians have done is that they escalated horizontally. The death of U.S. servicemen and women, right, is because Iran fired their medium-range ballistic missiles in facilities in Jordan and elsewhere in the Gulf. President Trump has focused the degradation along the Strait of Hormuz on the coast. The question before is, all right, does a target set need to expand? Do we need to escalate beyond that to get at the sources of these attacks? And then a more strategic question is, again, does the president only focus on opening up the Strait of Hormuz? Will he do an expanded project freedom? Or is the president seeking something more fundamental, which is the crumbling, the cratering of this regime? The latter would be far more expansive than the former of just trying to meet escalation horizontally that we've seen from the Iranians. John, I mean, it's low-hanging fruit for Democrats to throw grenades rhetorically at the president about this war. But bringing it to an end and having a U.S. objective that everybody sees is really nonpartisan.
Yes, but I think that the White House has demonstrated a lot of activity. I don't know that they've demonstrated a lot of progress, or at least they haven't done so to the American people. I think that the human toll of this, the loss of American service members, really does change things in people's minds too. They're certainly feeling the economic impact. As you mentioned, you know, oil is up to $81 a barrel. we're looking at $4 heading into kind of the summer holiday season. That's something that's really, hitting Americans in their daily lives. So the president has failed to kind of give strong parameters to this to kind of bring people along with him. And I just think that he's going to continue to have his numbers hit by this if he's not able to kind of change this narrative to a winning one.
This is not a popular war, but the president right now feels like he doesn't have much choice but to escalate and to continue in this, which puts them in a real political bind.
Yeah. Let's talk politics. We're not just the only ones covering this bloom of democratic socialists and socialists around the country. It is a real thing that people are talking about on the Democratic side, too. Here is Van Jones and Bill Maher about this.
Ideas that are literally insane, nutty, moronic, dangerous, bigoted, are not progressive, they're regressive, and they should not be in our party.
The talking point is, well, it's not communism, it's socialism. Okay, I've read the quotes. Don't tell me I'm not seeing what I am seeing.
Could you see yourself voting for J.D. Vance?
Yes.
So
wow.
It is something, right? I mean, it's not, it is happening.
Well, we're seeing it play out in Michigan right now. I mean, you have a candidate that is socialist in all but name. He doesn't want to call himself a democratic socialist, but everything he's advancing is what the socialists are saying. Perhaps because he's running for Senate, he can't be a democratic socialist because they're advocating abolishing the Senate. But short of that, he reflects this larger trend, and that's why I see people like Elizabeth Warren going his way, because they think they need to hold on to someone like al-Sayed to become, to be a progressive Democrat. They've lost their place. They've been outflanked by the left.
Here is that Michigan Democratic Senate candidate, Abdul al-Sayed.
Donald Trump is not himself the disease of our politics. He's just the worst symptom of the disease of our politics. The disease is the system that allows big corporations, billionaires, special interests like AIPAC to buy and sell politicians to do their bidding instead of ours.
So, John, if Van Jones and Bill Maher are sending up the red flares, is that what's happening inside the traditional Democratic Party?
Yes, and there should be more of it, to be honest, because the opinions that are being taken up by these democratic socialists are political non-starters in any of the places that we actually need to put together a Democratic majority. And look, Republicans aren't popular at this moment. Their one big beautiful bill has not been defined for the American people. Their numbers are down. This should be a layup for Democrats. Their only strategy is to sit and call the Democrats socialist. But the reality is that brand is actually sticking with Democrats. People buy it. And the reason they buy it is because it feels true. We've seen in the last election cycles that people sit and they look at the Democratic Party and they say it's weak. And you know what? Democrats need to grow a backbone, get a little bit of courage and sit and say, no, we are disavowing this. Maybe voters might reward that. But if we stick with these guys, it's going to be a political disaster for the party.
Clearly, Republicans look at it and they are licking their chops on that.
Well, I had Abdul al-Sayed on my podcast this past week, and the message that you heard him say at the rally there, he is relentless with that messaging. And John, there has been a dearth in the Democratic Party. You and I have talked about this. I've talked about this with a lot of Democrats, of that kind of energy, of that kind of voice. And that's one of the reasons that these folks are cropping up. There's been a gap, there's been a void, and people like Abdul al-Sayed are filling it. Now, whether that's ultimately good for the party or not, we'll have to see. But there's a reason why people are drawn to these candidates and why they're coming up right now.
Sure. I mean, passion is one thing, but the list of policy issues is another.
Absolutely.
So, all right, panel, thanks so much.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.